Howdy, class. I hope everyone's day is going well. So yesterday we learned about the compass rose, and we learned how to use compass directions to make distinctions between the equator and different places on Earth. Now we're going to take a look at those different places on Earth and find the differences that actually exist between them. So we're going to focus on the question, what makes a place more desirable to live? Now I have some pictures to share with you. This first one is Machu Picchu. It's an incredible ancient site where people used to live way up in the mountains. Beautiful views, but I bet it's pretty windy up there. This is located in Peru. Next, we have a Greek island in the Mediterranean. It's a seaside community. Looks beautiful with the flowers in the front and the gorgeous architecture. Definitely looks a lot different than Peru, though. Now, what does this place look like? The desert, right? Well, this is Phoenix, Arizona, and oh man, it's hot and dry here. But some people like the desert. And finally, no, this is not Michigan, this is Siberia. In Russia, it's cold and snowy, and for half the year they hardly see the sun. So, first and foremost, I want to hear what you guys all think today. So, I've opened up a forum, and you can post your responses to questions I'll have for you on there. Uh, Feel free to pause the video, go on there, and write your responses, and then come on back to me. So, the first question I have is, which of the places that I just showed you would you want to live in? And the second question is, what makes those places desirable to live in from your perspective? Now, it's important to understand that even though you may love rolling around in the snow and Siberia is your place, you wouldn't like it so much if you didn't have a warm house to go to. And if you love chasing lizards around the desert, coming home to AC would feel awful nice, wouldn't it? So just keep that in mind as we dive into this lesson. But first and foremost, I want to remind us that we need to be asking the questions that geographers ask. I think we do this because it helps us better understand our world. Geographers, for a living, study humans, and they study space, and they study environments and cultures. And when you get to know all those things, it helps you understand how the world works. So asking questions like geographers is super important. So since we're focusing on ancient cities today, I think we should be asking some questions like, where did people build the earliest great cities? And why there? Why in those places? So here's a map of the world. Do you guys remember all the important parts of the map? Go ahead and point at the North Pole and the South Pole. Now take your time and find the equator. Now look at the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. Notice the lines just north and just south of the equator. Now, I want you to point on the map where you think the best place for the biggest city in the world to be. Now, tell me, and go ahead and say it out loud, why you chose that spot. So today, we're going to actually see where those cities were. And who knows, maybe you were spot on. So like I was saying earlier, ancient people didn't have the heating systems we have now, and they sure didn't have air-conditioned homes. So we have this tendency to see these ancient cities as underdeveloped. I mean, they happened a long time ago, thousands of years ago, and we didn't even have cars until fewer than 150 years ago, so they must have been primitive back then. But I think the truth of the matter is that these peoples were very advanced. Just because they didn't have climate controlled buildings doesn't mean they weren't smart. They built roads and bridges, and they had a sewer system, and they made elaborate art and statues. I mean, just take a look at some of these carvings right here. Um, you can see how much detail was put into this. You can also see through this depiction of what ancient temples looked like in these ancient cities that these were no pushovers. The first city we're going to look at was called Babylon. And in 430 BCE, which is 2,500-ish years ago, Babylon was the biggest city in the world. You can see here an example of the great walls that they built around this city. There's also a depiction of those walls in this modern museum where you can see the intricacy in the colors and the different animal drawings that they put onto these walls. So there was really a lot of culture going on at this time. So this is a map from the same time period that Babylon was the largest city in the world. And the stars are the 12 biggest cities in the world at that time. Now, did we notice any trends? If you do, say them out loud. Now let's think about our geographer questions. Where did people build the world's greatest cities? Well, I think it's important to know what the term region means. Now, a region is a group on Earth that shares a similar trait and happens to be close together. Now, are there any places on this map where there are a lot of symbols bunched close together? It appears that our map has two clumps of symbols, and I think we could consider these to be regions. Now, we have one in the east and one in the west. Notice where those regions line up on the map. Take a second and observe the entire map. What is the significance about where those regions are? Another great city that many of you know is Rome. And in 100 CE, about 530 years after Babylon, Rome was the largest city in the world. Now here's a map, again showing the 12 largest cities, but now during the time when Rome was the largest. Remember our geographer questions. Where did people build the great cities and why? You think we can divide these symbols into regions like we did before? Yeah, I think we can. So where are these regions? Consider the map from Babylon. Do they look like similar places? Yeah, I think they do. Now take a look at the equator, which is right here, the Tropic of Cancer, and the Tropic of Capricorn. Which of these lines do our regions on both maps stay close to? Well, I think it's pretty clear that it's the Tropic of Capricorn, right? Or the Tropic of Cancer, sorry. But why there? Take a second, pause this video, and write your response in the forum. Come back to me when you're done. So many of you were probably thinking that maybe climate had something to do with this. So let's take a look at a map of average annual temperature around the world. I think this will show us how hot or cold a place is over the year. The blue box is Minnesota, which is pretty close to Michigan. And Michigan is pretty far from the equator. And then the red box is Sudan. It's in Africa, and it's pretty close to the equator. It's not very far. What do we notice about those places? Go ahead and say it out loud. Now, here's a map of all the warmest temperatures on this map. Notice how close they are to the equator. On the other end, here's where all the coldest temperatures are. Look how far away from the equator those tend to be. So how does temperature change as we move away from the equator? Again, feel free to say it out loud at home. It generally gets colder, right? So back to our ancient cities. Here are the regions with hot temperatures and the regions with cold temperatures. The hot, down here, and the cold, up here. Now, do you remember where most of our great cities were located? Point on the map. Right smack dab in the middle, right? Right here. Right where it's warm, between the hottest temperatures and the coldest temperatures. So, why do you think the cities were there? Well, I'd want to be there. The climate's pretty comfortable there. Think back earlier when we chose our favorite places to live from the pictures that I showed you. I mean, we agreed that we liked those places, but that our modern world had allowed us to live there comfortably. Now we have heating systems and air conditioning, but ancient peoples didn't have that. So, when you consider where ancient peoples wanted to live, it would only make sense that in those warm regions between the hot and between the cold, that you'd see a lot of these great cities developing. It was just the perfect place. A term for that we use is called the Goldilocks zone, when your porridge isn't too hot or too cold. So, I guess in summary, can't you see how when we ask questions like a geographer, we can learn a lot about whatever it is that we are interested in? I mean, we wondered why those ancient cities existed where they did, and just through asking questions, we were able to figure it out. So, I want to finish with two more questions, both of which you can post on your forum link. But looking back on your ideas from earlier, would you still want to live where you chose before if you lived in ancient times, knowing you wouldn't have AC and you wouldn't have central heating? And only one of those places that I shared was in the region where these ancient cities existed. Do you know which one it is? Tomorrow, we're going to figure out the lines of latitude and longitude so we can even better understand our orientation on the globe, and we can better understand the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer and how they relate to the equator. Have a great day.